G'day guys, Matt Brand here. Check this out. It's the new Toyota Landcruiser 300 series. It's going to be the most popular car of 2022. I can't tell you how many people have been asking me to review this, and I finally am. Here's the thing though, one of my favorite pastimes at home is to go onto YouTube and watch car reviews. That's how I got into this. And every single review of this car is so positive. Now, granted, it's a good car, it's a great car, but it has its flaws. It's not for everyone. And so in today's review, my goal is just to cut through the bullshit. I'm gonna give this thing a fair review, but I'm gonna be critical because it has flaws. Let's start with an obvious one. This one here is 140,000 Australian dollars, and it's not even top spec. This is the Sahara. There's like 2 models above this. And so for that kind of money, you could buy an Audi Q8, the flagship luxury SUV, or a well-equipped BMW X5. The list goes on, and I think you get my point. So in today's review, we're going to critically look at the new Toyota 300 series Landcruiser. I'm gonna take you through the exterior, the interior. We're gonna launch it, see how quick it is from 0 to 100. We're gonna drive it because that's kind of where this thing falls apart. And of course, we're going to off-road it too, which is definitely where this thing builds up some points with some asterisks. So let's just get straight into the review. Now, as always, let's start with the looks and up front. This is one of the first cars where I don't have to crouch down because if I do, I'm dwarfed by the car. This thing is enormous. And actually, I think it's a very good looking car. Looks are subjectives, but I mean, I think it looks good. I like the new grille. It looks more like an evolution than a revolution, which is a good thing because the 200 series Landcruiser was a really good looking car in my opinion. You have these really nice headlights here with bi-LED lights inside, very bright. A really cool turning signal here too that is sequential, and it's got a nice daytime running light to it too. This thing also has a massive amount of cooling to it. So up front, you've got a very open grille. You've also got these air ducts here that go back to another radiator. There are multiple at the front to keep this engine cool. You've got an LED fog light there. I also really like this double bubble hood here. It's so cool when you're looking from the inside. It looks enormous. It's a really big car. Really big car. But actually, it's not much bigger than the previous Landcruiser. It's got a wider track, but the same wheelbase, so that's pretty cool. Now, from the side, you can see that this is a pretty damn long car, just under 5 meters. But here's a fun fact. My SsangYong Chairman is longer than the Toyota Landcruiser. If you want to go see that review, it's just the weirdest car. Click up there or there somewhere. Anyway, let's get back to this. I really think it looks good from the side. It looks a bit weird with these smaller 18-inch wheels, but that is good for off-roading. Means you can put knobbier tires on it straight from the factory. You don't have to put a lift kit on it, though you probably would want to do that if you're gonna go off-roading. You get these all-terrain tires here, which as you'll see in the off-road section do help. But I really like the boxy design of it. You've got these chromed out wing mirrors here. Ooh, keyless entry and go, of course. You've got just roof rails that even I can hang off. You've also got these side steps here, which do feel a little bit flimsy. And on the other side of the car, there's already like a dent in it. So that's not great. Anyway, keep moving on. Privacy glass here. It looks like a bird has just shat there. Fantastic. But yeah, I mean, from the side, it's a big SUV, but I really like the way that this thing looks. And then the bum of this thing, again, is very good looking. I like this roof spoiler here. It's very squared off, very G-Wagon-y, but that is the trend. You've got these really nice LED rear lights here. The Toyota badge Landcruiser spelt out, just like before, thank golly. Over there, you've got yourself a Sahara badge. But here is one of my biggest complaints about the way that this thing looks, and it's with the back. It looks like it has a split tailgate like the 200 series before it, but it doesn't. No, it is a simple tailgate, right? Which is fine for most cars, but close. No, wrong way. To be honest, I hate that it doesn't have a split tailgate. One of the best things about the 200 series was you could open up the back and sit on it really comfortably, or you could just open up the top portion, throw shit in and close it back down. It was just a better system. I reckon they've done this to cut costs. That's my guess. They'll probably say otherwise, but that's what I think. Anyway, you've got a pretty nice bumper here. You've got your exhaust down there. All Landcruisers now come with a towing wiring kit fitted as standard. So that's very good. And then underneath there is a spare tire. The only issue is that the fuel filter is right next to the spare tire. And that means that if you wanted to put larger tires on there, I don't think you're going to be able to. So that could be an issue. Overall, I really like the way that the 300 series Landcruiser looks. Yes, it does lose the split tailgate of the 200 series, and I think that's a crying shame, but it's still a very good looking car, more of an evolution than a revolution, which is a good thing. 200 series looks great, and I think this looks even better. But I'm curious, what do you guys think of the way this thing looks? And what do you think about the split tailgate or lack thereof? While you're down in the comment section, why don't you subscribe to the channel? I'd love to have you around and you can see cool car reviews like this, where I give cars the sauce. Okay, let's talk interior. Okay, let's chat interior, and I'm really impressed, except for having to, literally climb up to get in. Now, first things first, you might notice that I'm wearing a different t-shirt, and I'll get into that when we go off-roading, if that gives you a hint. The quality of the materials in here are outstanding. Leathers here, you got soft plastics, you got open pore wood, metallic feeling, or they could be real metal buttons here. It's pretty amazing. It definitely feels quality. You are getting quality for what you pay. Even things down to the headliners, this beautiful like suede material. Often it's just like a cardboard, rubbishy cardboard. This is one of the ways to know if a car has good attention to detail in its interior anyway. I love the steering wheel. Again, that open pore wood, nice leather, great to hold on to, and metal buttons there. Control absolutely everything, of course. The center armrest, really well padded, and it is a fridge in this Sahara model anyway. So nice to have, especially on a hot day like today. Actually, let's pull this out because you've got a couple of cup holders here, and of course they fit in both. But this here, it is adjustable, and you can make it even longer if you want to, if you have taller drink items. Actually, while I got this out, door bins, they're kind of small. So this is a medium-sized bottle, 600 ml, and it only just fits in there. But you do get a massive glove box, enormous, plenty of room in there. And the overall design is really clean and tidy, where everything is logically laid out. I like it a lot. So what's not to like? Well, when I first got into this car, my knee whacked this center console and it shifted. It obviously came back, but there's movement. That is not something you would find in competitors of German descent at this price point. So that's not great. The other thing, and it's pretty egregious, is this infotainment display. You see, it's massive, which is great, but size does not matter when it comes to an infotainment screen anyway. It's logical to use, it's functional enough. The real issue is that it's completely washed out in any sort of medium to bright light situation. The graphics are poor. You'll find the same kind of system on a Toyota Yaris, and it's just not befitting of a $150,000 car, especially when you have a look at the 3D camera and you get like an egg-shaped camera. It's a bit ridiculous. You do of course get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, both of which are wired, but it's a functional enough system to use. It's just not up to par. Same with the instrument cluster. Now, there are two schools of thoughts between instrument clusters. Some say analog is forever best because it's more reliable. Well, I'm sure Toyota could develop a reliable digital instrument cluster, and I'm yet to see a failed digital instrument cluster in a car. And this just feels dated. It's not befitting of a car made in 2022. I do like the screen in the middle though. It shows plenty of information, and I generally like analog gauges. But again, like for example, Land Rover Defender has a really great digital instrument cluster, and no one's complaining about that. Now in the center here, you get your wireless charger, you get your meaty gear selector there. You've got your four-wheel drive controls here, which of course we'll get into off-road. Behind this little hidey hole here, you've got a 12-volt socket, a USB-C fast charger, and a USB-A port. And then of course you get your CD stacker, because that's not a 30-year-old technology now. But Toyota clearly know who their marketer is buying this car. You've got the really nice buttons here, as I said, and you've got your climate controls here, although some functions have been relegated to this digital screen, though most of the functions are here, so that's good. Now, one of the most important things in one of these cars are the seats, and I can report that the seats are pretty good. They're definitely not as good as what you'll find in the German competitors. Again, don't come at me, it's just how they are. They're not as adjustable, for example. You've got one-way lumbar support, but they do have memory seats. They are pretty supportive, especially over longer journeys. I haven't found many issues at all. I wish there was a bit more leg support though, but that's probably nitpicking. My real issue is that they're in this really nice looking tan leather. Now, what happens when you take white leather off-roading? I think you can guess. The carpets on this car, nice thick pile carpets, are brown. And these have been cleaned. These are clean, but you can only do so much with off-road stains. I think if you go for this interior, you have completely relegated yourself to not going off-road, because you're just gonna ruin the interior. So yes, if you're going to go off-roading in this car, don't get the tan interior. You will rue the day. Everything will get very, very dirty. And as part of this Sahara package, you do get a sunroof here, well, they call it a moonroof, and you've got a really nice JBL sound system, like surprisingly good. Let's talk back seats. Okay, so the second row, well, first of all, you have to kind of step up again, but really no big deal. close this door here. Once you're back here, you can see that I actually don't have an insane amount of room. Now, I'm 5'11". This is my seating position. Not much knee room. Toe room is pretty abysmal, but I've got great headroom. I could definitely be comfortable back here though. It's not a bad place to be by any stretch. As you can see, I've got a big fat tablet right in front of my face, which is great for the kids. You can change the music from here, or you can watch something through the rear HDMI down there, and it's on both sides too, so that's very cool. In terms of amenities, we have a third zone of climate control back here, and not only that, we have both heated and cooled seats for the outboard seats. That's pretty spectacular. Down the bottom, you have two USB fast chargers. You have a 12-volt socket, an HDMI in port, and you have auxiliary ins for listening with headphones. So that'll keep mum and dad sane, I think. These seats are super duper comfortable, just like up front. They do recline a little bit, though not as much as before, and they don't slide at all, which is a shame, as you'll see when we go into the third row. Now, you got a center armrest here, and it does feel really quite nice with a little push button open, and you get a couple of cup holders there too. Oh, and how could I forget? You get a nice little mat pocket there, and air vents up there, and down the bottom, and you can change all of that through there. So very impressive. So apart from space, the back seat is a really nice place to be, and you do get stadium style seating. So this seat is higher than this seat, and that seat is higher than this seat. And so you can kind of see over a bit more. It just helps with road trips and nausea, for example. All right, let's go check out the third row. Let's get into the third row now. So to do that, it's okay. We pull this lever here. This whacks the screen, which is fantastic. Push that bit further down. Then we clamber in, right? I'm already out of breath. Okay, here we go. Oh. Okay. Fine. So first of all, carpet is dirty. Really bad. Anyway, let's pull this up. Ugh. Alrighty. So clearly this space is not meant for adults. So I am 5'11" and I have enough space. Enough knee room. Toe room is, non-existent. My legs are at a weird, upright angle, so I don't really like that, but it's seriously not the end of the world. Again, you got that stadium style seating, so I'm sitting higher than the second row, which is nice. I can see straight through the windscreen. Got some air vents back here, which is really nice on a hot day like today. You've got a couple of cup holders there. You've also got a USB-C fast charger, and I can also recline these seats electronically. You can do that on both sides too. So it's a pretty nice place to be. A lot of car reviewers are complaining about the space, and yes, it's not ideal, but it's seriously not the end of the world. Okay, let's talk practicality. Now, in terms of boot space, yes, you do get a power tailgate on the Sahara up. It's very loud. It's actually kind of annoying. But once you're in here, yeah, you can see with all three rows up, you don't get that much room. In fact, here's my backpack for scale. That's not a big backpack. Now on the Sahara up, you do get electronically folding seats, although you still have to pull that up to put the headrest down. And then you can hold these two buttons here, and these seats very slowly move forward. Like seriously, you might as well just have manual seats. Anyway, once you're back here, there is actually quite a lot of room. You also get a tiny bit of underfloor storage. You do get a household socket there, but it's only 100 watts, so you're not gonna be charging much with it. Again, bag for scale, and actually you do get a pretty decent amount of room. Also, it's probably good to know this. On this side, you get your fuse box, and on this side, you get your jack. So if you break down, you got that. Now, of course, we can put down the second row, but there isn't any electronics for that, so we have to be a plebeian and come around to do it. But when we do, we can just pull that forward. Oh, and it hit the screen. I can see that being an issue. Gonna have to move the front seats forward really far. That's strange. It's all a bit of a faff. I'm not gonna lie, it's all a bit of a faff. Can we even put this seat down properly? No, same thing happens. We whack the back screen. That's gonna break at some point. You see, this car has comfort access, so the driver's seat goes back when you turn the car off, and clearly that's an issue if you want to put down the second row. So again, we're gonna have to come around here, slide the seat all the way forward, and then that will allow it to eventually go all the way back. That is ridiculous. Anyway, once you do that, you do get quite a lot of space back there, like 2,000 liters, just over. Can it redeem itself in its specifications? Let's talk about that. Now, the Land Cruiser range kicks off at just under $100,000, but that car is so basic, I would avoid it like the plague and get yourself a Nissan Patrol, which would just be so much better at that price. As I said, this is the Sahara, and there are two models above this, the Sahara ZX and the GR Sport. And this one here is just over $143,000. $1,000 Australian dollars. And no matter what way you spin that, that is a lot of money. As I said, you can buy a BMW X5 well loaded, you can buy an Audi Q8, the flagship SUV. There's a lot you can buy for that price, which is why I'm so sick of reviewers being like, oh, it's amazing, go buy one. It's so expensive. Anyway, all Land Cruisers come with the same engine, and it is a very good engine. It's all new. It's a 3.3 litre twin turbo diesel V6. Yes, it replaces the outgoing V8, but in every measurable way, this engine is better. 227 kilowatt of power, 700 Newton meters of torque, better fuel economy, although it's not great as you'll see. And even though this is a brand new engine, it's a Toyota. I think we can all agree that it's probably gonna have pretty good reliability, though time will tell. I guess one way to diminish its reliability is to launch it, so let's do that. Okay, so now we're gonna launch the new Land Cruiser 300 series. Of course, there is no official launch control or launch timing, anything like that, but we're gonna see how quickly it will go from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour. To do that, we're gonna put the car into sport mode, and in a car like this, which has no adaptive dampers, the only thing it really changes is the steering tune and also the throttle response. So let's do it. Foot on the brake, foot on the accelerator. Oh, actually felt pretty good. Come on, baby. All right, we got our 0 to 100 time. 0 to 100 in 8.71 seconds. That's really not too bad for a 2.5 ton vehicle, though the Nissan Patrol is a little bit quicker. But how does it drive when you're not being an idiot? Let's go talk about that. Okay, so driving the new Land Cruiser. Right now I'm on a gravel road and I almost can't tell. I am so comfortable right now. The way that the suspension has been set up and the dampening is just, it's on another level. It's really smooth, soft, and it feels very, very refined. With, might I add, very minimal noise. However, there is a downside to that. I'm on a road right now. Let's put my foot down, get a bit of sauce, and then we turn, and I almost have to lean the opposite way because there is so much body roll. The only way I can really describe driving a 300 series Land Cruiser is go back to the 90s, and that's how this thing drives. I don't feel confident driving this thing, at least on hilly back roads like I am now. Of course, it's not meant for that, but it's not good for it either. It doesn't help that it has this hydraulic steering, which is very, very light. There are a few school of thoughts around if it helps with off-roading, and maybe it does, but for on-roading, it's really inferior to the electronic steering that we have today. But then you really don't give it its 10 tenths and you go at 5 out of 10 and you're just driving along, and it is a really nice experience. Very, very comfortable. And you have this really king of the road feel where you're sitting up above everything. There's a Jeep Grand Cherokee in front of me right now and I feel like I am dwarfing that car. The brakes are decent. Again, it has to pull up a 2.5 ton vehicle. That's not an easy job. And I don't know, it just, you know, I'm not enjoying driving it on these country roads. I enjoy it on a highway. I enjoy it literally cruising, and maybe that's why it's called the Land Cruiser. And let me tell you, around town it gets even worse. I spent most of my time with this thing in an urban setting, and it was pretty bad. And it's pretty bad because it has a 10-speed automatic transmission, for example. And you know, a lot of reviewers seem to rave about it while going 100 kilometers an hour. Well, let me tell you, when you're going 20, 30, 40 kilometers around town, it's not that great. It searches for gears. It's just not very well refined. The engine itself is pretty decent. On paper, for a diesel, it's got a lot of power. It's got a lot of torque. But you know, you put your foot down, takes a second, and it's just like a nice slow build-up of power, but nothing substantial. The kind of person that's going to benefit from buying a Toyota Land Cruiser are the kind of people that want to drive from Melbourne to Northern Territory, go through the Simpson Desert, and have ultimate reliability. It's also the kind of people that want to tow something like a caravan around Australia, again, reliably. In my opinion, it is not for the kind of person that just wants to drop their kids off at school and go to the shops. There are much better large SUVs for that. And that's my whole point of this video, is just to stop this like insane hype around this car. I've also got a couple more things I'm not entirely stoked about. You don't get a Torsen limited slip differential like you do in the GR Sport. Even though you're spending 140 grand, you don't get it. And that would help with, for example, right now where I am cornering, because it sends power to the wheel with most grip. Whereas here, I'm just sliding all around my seat, to be honest. There's also a system called KDSS, which is a disconnecting front and rear sway bar. Again, it's something that you get on the GR Sport, but not on this. And that helps with cornering, theoretically. I have spoken to some other journalists, they haven't found that. But you know, I'll put my foot down here, good amount of torque there, and I'll turn this corner and I can just feel it diving. And there's another thing this doesn't come with, and that is adaptive dampers. That does come on the GR Sport and the Sahara ZX. You kind of don't need it though. This is a really good suspension tune for this car. You know, they haven't gone for an overly sporty anything, it's just comfortable, which is exactly how I would want it. The adaptive dampers, they do go a little bit more comfortable than this, but that does come at the expense of becoming even more wafty. And then sport mode on that car is like weirdly stiff for a car that still body rolls very hard because it weighs 2.5 tons. There's definitely a market of buyers for the Landcruiser 300 series. I totally see it. But don't just go rushing out to buy one of these for your grocery hauler, because there are so many better cars for that. So many better cars for that. If you use this car for its intended purpose, which is long distance travel and towing, you're gonna love it. But how does it fare off-road? Well, let's go talk about that. Okay, so now we're gonna go off-roading, and I said I'd get back to you about the shirt. So this is actually the second time that I've attempted off-roading in this car today. The first time we went to a pretty muddy location, and well, let's just say that there was a lot of cleaning to do, and when I cleaned it, my whole top got ruined. So that's why I've had to change. Yes, I was probably the first person in the world to ever get bogged in a Landcruiser 300 series, so I'm not sure if I should be proud or sad about that, but it is what it is. So now we're gonna do some light off-roading. It's not gonna be anything too intense. We tried that. This car, it's got its limitations. You see, even though this does cost 140 grand, you don't get a locking front or rear diff. You only get a center locking diff. You only get a front and rear locking diff with the GR Sport. You also don't get the KDSS system, which means you don't get a disconnecting front or rear sway bar or a Torsen limited slip diff. A lot of these mechanical items you kind of want in the GR Sport. You don't get that here. It's still a very capable off-roader though, but as I said, we're gonna do some light off-roading. So before we go, let's go through some specs. You have a 32-degree approach angle, a 25-degree departure angle. You have a ground clearance of 235 millimeters and a weighting depth of 700 millimeters. So some pretty good stats there. Now, as I said earlier, this has a permanent four-wheel drive system. So doing some very light stuff here. I really don't need to engage the low range transfer case. I also don't want to crash. This thing is enormous, guys. Oh my gosh. But the first minor test is going up a relatively large hill. So we're going to do that now. So there's a few systems we can employ to help us. First things first, let's put this car into low range. So we put the car into neutral, press down, go into L4. We're also going to put on the center locking diff, because why not? Why not? So that has been engaged. Now, there's also something called MTS here, multi-terrain select. We'll press that, and this goes into our off-road driving mode. So there's auto, sand, mud, and rock. Let's just go into auto, because really these cars can just drive themselves off-road using their traction control systems. That's really what that is. And then there's also this DAC crawl control, which means that we can actually let it crawl up the hill by itself. So we're going to engage that, and we can control the speed of that using this dial here. So let's do that. Let's let go. Car is controlling itself. I think we can go a little bit faster. Oh, let's go into high speed going up this hill. This should be an absolute piece of cake, but it is a pretty decent incline here. So we're about 15 degrees, but it feels a bit more than that, especially because it weighs so much. Yeah, that was super easy. No issue at all. Let's take it out of this DAC crawl, and it will also do the same thing if we want to go downhill. But right now I want to do some bit of an extreme angle, so let's do that. So one of the benefits of having a body on chassis setup is that you get a more rigid car. That's why cars are still using what is a pretty old technology. And right here, we're gonna go on some pretty extreme angles for this car, and I'm a little bit worried, but I think we'll be okay. Oh my gosh. So we are almost at 30 degrees here, and it feels it. Oh man. Like for me, this feels pretty extreme, but for this, it's probably a walk in the park. And this suspension is very, oh gosh. This suspension is very good in its articulation straight from the factory without any sort of lift kit on it. Oh. Again, it's light off-roading, but a lot of cars struggle through there. And so even though this is an enormous family vehicle, it's still pretty amazing how it does. If you're gonna be taking this thing seriously off-roading, then just don't go for anything other than a GR Sport, because you really do want that front and rear locking diff. As I found out earlier, a center diff is just not enough to be able to pull you out of some pretty, average situations like the one I was in. If I had the front and rear locking diff, I think that would have been a very, very different situation. There is one more feature that I did forget to mention, and that is that this has a turn assist control. So you have to have the car in its crawl mode, and then you can press this turn assist button here. And then what it does is it brakes the inside wheel and lets you have a tighter turning circle. So that does feel a bit weird because it is definitely braking that wheel at the back. But I'll tell you what, that is a pretty tight turning circle. And that's really handy to have when you are in some precarious off-road situations. Anyway, let's get into my final thoughts. Okay, so what are my final thoughts on the new Toyota Landcruiser 300 series? Now, as I said in this video, I'm going to be critical. I have been quite critical. However, I still wholeheartedly stand by that this is not the car for everyone. The exterior is really nice. I think it's a nice upgrade over the 200 series, though it's not that much better. And you do lose the split tailgate, which is a shame, but not a deal breaker. The interior space is a really, really nice place to be, although it's not up to par of BMW or Audi, and it has some glaring issues. For example, that infotainment display is crap. And the 360 camera is a joke. Not to mention that with a light interior like this, you already have brown carpets if you're going to be taking this thing any sort of off-roading. It kind of just ruins it. If you're going to get the light interior, I think you've just admitted to yourself that you're not going to go off-roading in this thing. But still, it's a very comfortable, nice, well-refined place to be. The way that this thing drives is not great. It is a 2.5-ton behemoth. It has a body-on-frame design, which is great for off-roading, as you guys saw, but it's not great for on-road. And if you're going to be mainly in the city, don't kid yourself. There's no need to buy a Landcruiser. This is the kind of car that's fantastic if you're going to be going around Australia and towing something. It will be super comfortable and it will be ultra reliable. But if you're going to be driving around Melbourne City for pretty much all the time, get yourself an Audi Q8 or a BMW X5 that's well loaded, because they will be so much nicer cars to live with on a day-to-day basis. I like the Toyota Landcruiser, I really, really do, but I'm not going to pretend that it's for everybody. It's just not. And at 150 grand, you have a lot of options. You have a lot of options. But I'm curious, what do you guys think of the new Toyota Landcruiser 300 series? Have I been too harsh, or am I on the mark? Let me know in the comment section below, just below that like button. Subscribe if you're new, I'd love to have you around. And why don't you click over there, watch one of my other reviews. I highly recommend it. Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next week.